Hi everyone, Refiloe Mpakanyane here. It's such a pleasure to be with you here in my capacity as associate producer with African Tech Roundup, of which I've been a big fan for many years. Now, this is the special edition of African Tech Roundup with an amazing focus on digital transformation on the African continent. Over the next 4 videos, we will be speaking to C-suite leaders in the telecommunications industry and adjacent industries and exploring what digital transformation for the continent as a whole could possibly mean, what it could possibly look like, and if we can in fact realize the $100 billion potential of such an outcome for all of us in Africa. I had these conversations in Franschhoek in the Western Cape, which of course is self-dubbed the Silicon Valley of South Africa. So it's not a coincidence that the NOVACOM Africa Summit, the very first of its kind on the continent, took place in Cape Town. And it's there that various African leaders in the telecoms business were invited to connect, to drive some solutions to digital transformation on the continent, but most importantly, to think deeply, and I guess in many ways let their imaginations run wild about what is possible, but most importantly, what is feasible. My first guest on the series of videos on episode 1 is Dr. Juliet Ehimuan, former MD of Google West Africa. She was kind enough to sit down with us, even though she was crunched for time, and spend some time explaining to us what she thinks about or what she imagines when we talk about digital transformation on the continent. And you're probably wondering who us is. Us is myself and my colleague Adam Wakefield from the Africa Pre-Seed podcast. You'll see us both on the video as we share the stage and interact with Dr. Juliet Ehimuan. And of course, the conversation is wide-ranging, but definitely worth your while. It ranges from the macro, that is government interventions, to the more intimate, such as the kind of skills that entrepreneurs should make sure to get, or the kind of self-auditing that entrepreneurs should be sure to do as they continue on that journey of self-fulfillment and self-realization. Let's check it out. From your perspective, what does digital transformation in the African landscape look like? You could even just narrow it down, in fact, to Nigeria. What does that look like in the best case scenario? What are you wishing for?
Sure. So digital transformation, I would say in many ways is already underway in Africa. And more, the digital economy, which is really the marketplace for digital goods and services, has been growing and is increasingly becoming a strong contributor to job creation, economic growth, and GDP in our countries. And when I think about the digital transformation, we can really see that in 3 buckets. The first is just access. And this is, broadband connectivity, people coming online. At the end of last year, there were around 570 million Africans online. Which represents significant growth. In 2015, that number was, it's actually more than double the number that we had in 2015. So in 7 years, we've more than doubled the number of internet users in Africa. We have about 500 million smartphone users. Smartphone prices have been coming down as well. So more Africans are getting connected, which is great because that's giving them access to a lot of digital tools, platforms, and services that they can use for business growth, to develop themselves, and for other purposes as well. So that's one pillar, which is really around access, internet access. The second pillar is around local content development. So when we talk about digital transformation and the digital economy, it's also having a rich and diverse portfolio of locally relevant content that people can engage with. So when you think about business information online, right? African businesses online, African creative content on platforms like YouTube, we're seeing an increase in that space. We have a generation of African entrepreneurs that are building their businesses around digital content creation and monetizing that content on platforms like YouTube. Some of them earning up to 7-figure incomes, right? And there's been a year-on-year increase in that. When you think about the innovations that we're seeing in the tech entrepreneurship space, right, fueled by technology. So this is also in the space of digital transformation, using technology to solve local problems. So for example, we know in a lot of our countries, financial inclusion is a challenge, right? And we've seen a rise in fintech startups. These are companies that are using technology to address the financial inclusion challenge. And, we see services in that space ranging from payments to savings and investments. So payments, platforms like Flutterwave and Paystack. Savings and investments, you have players like PiggyVest and Bamboo, to even blockchain, digital banks like Kuda, and quite a breadth of services. That's fintech. I started with fintech because we've seen increasing investment into the startup space in Africa.
Sure.
And a huge percentage of that has gone to fintech, over 40%, right? But we've seen that across other sectors as well, health tech, right? When we talk about, health logistics, remote diagnostics, telemedicine, e-commerce. So Jumia, as an example, Jumia is an e-commerce player present in 12 countries across Africa. They were listed on the New York Stock Exchange in 2019. And in 2021, they were valued at $5.8 billion, right? We've gone from, in the last 10 years, we've gone from 0 unicorns to 8 unicorns in Africa. A unicorn is a business valued at over $1 billion. Sure. So examples include Flutterwave, Jumia, Andela, Cheaper Cash, Fowry, and so on. So it's good to see the wave of growth and transformation across the continent. The final piece will be skills development.
Sure.
When we talk about digital transformation, we're talking about people having the skills to be able to participate in the digital economy, to be able to use these platforms and services. So from a user perspective, but also from a developer perspective, we need developers that can build apps, right? So these apps I talked about that are solving local problems, we need developers with skills to build these cloud-based apps or mobile apps and use, even emerging technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so I think it's a great time from a technology perspective. And I think, following the pandemic as well, we've seen an acceleration in that drive towards embracing, digital technologies and opportunities.
Yeah. And you mentioned that, key to unlocking those 3 pillars that you've just discussed is, in many instances, regulatory frameworks that are able to foster a conducive environment. Talk me through, and let's use Nigeria as an example now, talk me through 3 specific, perhaps, regulations or approaches that you would like to see being implemented in Nigeria. And I'll tell you what I have in mind when we think of China, for instance, right? So we are obviously talking about Africa, mainly dealing with low to middle income countries. And when I think of China and I think of the interventions that they've made in various industries, including tech, Shenzhen, for instance, being established as a free trade zone, and that then engendered it, or enabled it rather, to be able to become a hardware manufacturing hub and leader. And they've moved on into many other things, including finance and transportation. So having a long-term vision that supersedes the tenure of any one politician is obviously key. But we also then look at countries such as Singapore, once again, long-term strategies to engender and foster innovation and growth at home in a staged, and sort of consecutive basis. What 3 things would you like to see from a regulatory and policy perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll talk broadly across the region. I would say, 1, it's so important to create an enabling environment for infrastructure investment and growth, because that's the foundational element. That's the starting point. To be able to engage in all the great things I've been talking about, we need to be connected. And so governments need to, we need, regulation to remove some of the bottlenecks that carriers and service providers experience around right-of-way issues. In some cases, multiple taxation. In some cases, telecom assets being vandalized, right? So declaring them as critical national infrastructure, encouraging infrastructure sharing, those kinds of policies, so that it is more there is a lot more. There are more incentives for investing in infrastructure growth. So that's one area to just really stimulate the access space. And also, to provide support to entrepreneurs, right? Because it's great to see the, unicorns I talked about and the growth in the tech startup space. But for every unicorn out there are at least 1,000 other businesses that don't have that are doing great work in the space, but don't have the visibility and support, the visibility and exposure to get the support that they need. And so this is another area where government can just really provide some enabling regulation. In Nigeria, for example, recently, a startup bill was created, which is a positive development. And in terms of support to entrepreneurs, this is where accelerators, tech hubs, incubators really play an important role. But if you look at some statistics, at the moment in the UK, we have about 750 incubators and accelerators. In the US, it's quadruple that number, just over 2,000.
Sure.
In Africa, a region with 1.5 billion people, we have just 47 incubators. And if you combine the number of incubators, accelerators, and tech hubs, we're talking about 643. So that's really, it's very clear that there's a lot of support needed. So that's another area where a lot of this is private sector driven, to be honest.
Yes.
But this is also where government can play a role in trying to, accelerate investment in that space. And then, of course, skills development. But I will link this to digitizing government, right?
Yeah,
as a third thing, because in our markets, government is a huge consumer, right? Our governments are large. And also government is a huge influencer.
Yes.
If I have to go online to get government services like a passport or my driver's license, I need those things. So I'll go online. So if we digitize government, one, we're going to have more efficiency, right? But also it's going to influence the citizenry and force people to actually, develop themselves to be able to access those services, right? So I think that would be a game changer if we can just really, if a lot of our governments can be fully digitized.
Yeah. Adam, I know you have a question.
I was about to jump in, but please, after you.
Sorry,
I can see it bubbling on
just a very quick follow-up. Are our governments nimble, dynamic enough to be essentially what economist Mariana Mazzucato talks a lot about as government becoming, in the mind of every founder or entrepreneur, the lender of first resort as opposed to last resort. And what that means is we look at the space in the US where for the internet to develop, that was essentially based, it comes on the backbone of military development and obviously government funding for all of those things to happen. For instance, for SpaceX to exist and for Elon Musk to have the kind of company that he does, he's essentially then utilizing and piggybacking off of an immense and many, many years of government development and research and development and innovation when it comes to NASA and satellites and space exploration. So there definitely is a possibility for industries and innovation and tech to happen off the back of government intervention, but also government pulling in individual entrepreneurs and innovators. But are we too risk averse rather, as Africans, to our detriment?
So government certainly has a big role to play. And if we look at the trend so far, a lot of the innovation has been more private sector driven. The investments as well have been a lot more private sector driven. And if we've come this far, then, with enabling policies and, a lot more support, right, for research and development, for, investing in skills development at scale, these kinds of things that we're talking about, we're going to see a lot more growth.
I'm going to jump on skills development in particular. You've painted quite a rich picture of the enabling environment that government needs to create. If I'm a founder on the street in Lagos or Abuja, what questions should they be asking to identify the skills that they should have or should acquire in trying to tackle a pain point they're looking to solve from a tech-oriented solution? And following from that, mentorship plays a critical role within the ecosystem. How do they go about identifying the right mentors or even approaching them from a practical standpoint for a founder's perspective?
Yeah, that's a very important point, and that's a vital piece. So first of all, just even establishing the importance of that challenge, because the fact that you're a great developer, right? You're able to build a great product doesn't mean that you'll be a good manager. Doesn't mean that you can build a business. It doesn't even mean that you're a great presenter, that you can package that and present to maybe a fundraiser or someone else, right? The fact that you're able to get a bunch of people together, maybe 3 people, you start a business and you're making great progress, doing some fantastic work, doesn't mean that you'll have the necessary experience when that organization grows to 100 people or even 300 people if it's a fast growth environment like we're seeing in some cases, right? So that support is really important, and mentorship plays a key role. If we look globally, if we look at a lot of the Silicon Valley organizations, we've heard stories of mentorship for founders as a critical element in their growth and development as founders, as business leaders. And so, that's really important to be available for our founders. And this is where programs can be really helpful, right? Because, there may be some founders that have straight access to people that can mentor them, but not everyone would have that access or even be able to identify that these are the gap areas and these are the people that can really help me, and actually even have access to reach those people. And so communities, right? Founder communities, accelerators that also help to, create connection opportunities or networking opportunities between founders and, potential mentors are important. That's why also, one of the things that I do with Beyond Limits is a founder fellowship program, which includes just a team of experts that have the competencies to mentor startup founders. So over a period of a few weeks, some of those colleagues and I spend time with these founders and just going through different aspects of running your business and building your own capacity as an individual, as a leader, right, to help you, navigate challenges and grow the business. So that's a very important piece.
I'm going to quickly lean in on the point you made about conservatism within the environment. About 3/4 of the investment within the ecosystem at large across Africa is foreign investment. What pivotal pillar factors, to use that term, are holding back local African companies from investing, particularly in a Nigerian example? Why aren't they paying more attention or dedicating more capital to their own ecosystem, for example? Because the opportunity is there. I think we all understand it, but what's holding them back from, I guess, a business perspective or approach?
Yes, so this is actually one area that can also be very helpful to a lot of our entrepreneurs, because I mentioned that for every unicorn you have 1,000 businesses that don't have the exposure, etc., and are unable to necessarily package for an international investor, right? But they may actually, because local investors can have potentially a better appreciation for the nuances of the environment, be able to see the opportunity, be able to see, business models that may not be the traditional business models, but that are important for you to be able to make things work in this environment, right? So it's really important for that local investor landscape to develop further. And I think it's really about, finding ways to showcase and surface these opportunities a lot more so that the local investors can develop a stronger sense of confidence in making those investments, right? Nurturing angel investor communities, right? And just really being deliberate about fostering those kinds of connections.
Adam, you want to take the last one?
I will leave it over to yourself.
All right, fantastic. We talk a lot, you've been talking about the work that you do and in mentoring founders, entrepreneurs. And I'm keen to find out from you what your own personal specific approach is when it comes to mentoring, perhaps your hack, because as you mentioned, every every entrepreneur, founder has their own specific skill set, but beyond that, their own personality. So we're not all extroverts, as you say. We're not all able to get into a room and command people's attention. And perhaps we can lean into that and, make the fact that you are introverted your superpower.
Yes.
So how do you then lean into, those kinds of insights to make sure that your mentoring is in fact effective, because you want to be effective as opposed to having numbers and through the door.
Absolutely. So that's very interesting because I did a whole doctoral research around this.
There we go.
Great question.
And so it's focused on the founders themselves.
Yes.
And based on the doctoral research that I did, which is really looking at some of the building blocks, right, that are important around, self-direction, self-efficacy, and things like that. There's a survey that they are invited to take. And that survey, it's a leadership archetype survey to just give you a sense of your strengths, your tendencies, opportunities, and areas for development. So that the results of that survey then forms the basis for a one-to-one coaching that you get on top of the general curriculum, providing the standard elements that are important as a leader.
Yeah.
So there's tailored curriculum as well.
So very important. And of course, in closing, the greatest insight that you wish you had when you started out on this journey, and of course it's been a fantastic one, but perhaps is that one little bit of information that you'd have liked to have had at the very beginning?
That's an interesting one. Like you said, it's been a great ride. I'm really grateful for the journey and the people I've had the opportunity to work with, the projects, the impact, and there's never a dull moment, right? Things are constantly changing and evolving, and I guess it would really be just. So funny. That's that's a tough one.
Yeah. It's forcing you to dig deep, essentially.
Yeah. So something I wish I knew at the start. I guess really just it's just enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
That's a broad, but it's something that is very real and present for me. Enjoy the journey because there's never the end point, right?
Absolutely.
The journey is the experience, and the journey continues.
Yeah.
And so leaning in fully and enjoying the journey.
The journey is the point.
The journey is the point. Yeah.
And I'm going to follow on from that with my final question. How do you maintain perspective, especially as a founder where you're under an intense amount of pressure to get your product correct? You may be managing a team who are looking to you for leadership. How do you maintain your mental health? And I guess to lean in on your question, how do you know where you are in your journey and to take yourself out of that position to realize it's a lot, but it's not everything?
Yes.
How do you maintain that perspective?
Yes. I think it's important to have a very clear sense of purpose and to have clarity of vision. This is what I'm about, this is what is important to me, and this is what I'm creating. And to have that as your North Star and your compass to check back with, right? Because it's so easy to get sucked into the detail, into the complexities, the challenges, and all of that. If you're not anchored in you and centered around my purpose, this is why this is important, then you can just find yourself being pulled in different directions and losing your way in a way. So I think just having that grounding in your sense of purpose and clarity of vision is important.
Super.
Lovely. Dr. Juliet, thank you so much.
Thank you. Really
Thank
appreciate
you.
It's been a real pleasure. Thanks.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for watching African Tech Roundup Special Edition on digital transformation on the African continent. You can leave your comments and your feedback below. And don't forget to check out the African Tech Roundup podcast on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, subscribe and like there. Check you out next time.